May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now entering the sanctuary. I'll now present one of the sons of Yisrayl, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech today is Why War and Fighting. The scripture says that there will be wars, and that prophecy has come to pass and still is coming to pass. If you'll turn over to Matthew 24:7, Matthew 24:7, found on page 752, it says, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, disease epidemics, and earthquake in place after place." Yeshua Messiah prophesied that there will be wars. The only thing that causes wars is lust. If you'll turn over to Jacob 4:1, found on page 955, it says, "What causes wars and fighting among you? Is it not from this, the lust that battles in your members?" As you can see from this graph, this is in 2011. The United States has been at peace 21 years, been at war 214 years. Now that was in 2011, but in 2016, the current year we're in right now, there's been 240 years of war. From 1776 to 2011, there has only been 21 years of no military action and 214 years of war. Altogether, that is 235 years. Now on the website, the 3 steps to stopping all wars. Step 1 is slow down and assess what's going on. The second step is admit we need to change and we have to be quick about it. And that's probably the hardest thing we could do, because most people don't like pointing out their faults. None of us like pointing out our faults. And step 3 is lay a foundation for every child in the world by making available the best character education program ever. It will only take 6 months for most children to complete it. In the 11th book of Israel, part 2, chapter 2, verse 47, it says, the only way, not the possible way, or this might be the way, the only way you can keep the Peaceful Solution character education program from working is, of course, ignoring it. Don't use it and it won't work for you. and you'll be like Cain. Why are you so angry, Cain? Why are you so bitter? You hate the world. Why? Why are you always in a fight, in an uproar? We're speaking to the nations. All the nations have gone the way of Cain, not of Yahweh. All the churches today are filled with evil. They bring forth evil. They don't bring forth the lies of righteousness or the peaceful solution character education program. They don't teach that. They don't love Yahweh. Which, if you look back there to verse 5 again, that's the first and greatest commandment. First and greatest law. The second one is love your neighbor as yourself. In conclusion, I would like to say, war has not and will not bring peace. Only the 613 laws of Yahweh will bring peace.
If y'all remain standing, I'd like to turn it over to the son of Yisrayl Abel, Deacon White Buffalo Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. My title today is The Army. I wanted to bring this speech to show you how Yahweh protects his house and the many instances that he has done so. I would also like to show you who and what Yahweh uses to do so. We in Yahweh's house are very protected. Yahweh has assigned us, Yisrayl Hawkins, and his whole house, the place Yahweh chose to place his name, personal bodyguards. Some big, some small, and we cannot even see them. In the Yisrayl Hawkins says, Overseer Yisrayl Hawkins tells us some of what Yahweh uses to protect his house. In the first book of Yisrael, chapter 2, and verse 31, Pastor says, Yahweh has never been anything but loving and kind. He showed his power over the gods. He showed how he did not need an army at all. He can confuse the enemy where they will confuse each other. His Malachim did this. This was given in detail. Note the word Malachim. I've got to get this in your mind because this blasphemy is coming against Yahweh right now. They're wanting to get you to worship the Queen of Heaven because she is peaceful, kind, loving, thoughtful, and an adulterous whore. Yes, she's that too, and the scriptures say that. In the 13th book of Yisrael, part 2, chapter 22, and verse 27, Pastor says the citrus industry is facing a crisis. It's called citrus greening. Now, what is this? They don't know. I just don't know what this is. We just know that this little bug here, this little green bug is carrying it. So small you can't see him without a magnifying glass. He's carrying it, and it's one mighty army that's sweeping across our fields and killing our orange trees in Florida, in Texas. Yes, several places, but we're suffering from it right here. It's called mutations from STDs, mutations of all kinds. There are all kinds of them now, and they're attacking anything that they can find to eat. It's like a bunch of hungry wolves that are trying to find something to eat. In the New York Times from March 9, 2004, it says, the doctor's world, new microbes could become the new norm. Now what what does these words new microbes mean? These crossbred, mutated the crosses between humans and beasts, crossbred microbes. Okay, it says they have become household names, such as SARS, avian influenza, monkeypox, and anthrax. It says, but not in the so distant future, said Dr. Julie L. Gerberding, the director for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The public is likely to hear about a host of less familiar diseases and health problems as outbreaks of such illnesses become a new norm. These gods newly breeding, newly coming up. Among the microbes on the horizon are the Rift Valley virus, a disease transmitted by mosquitoes that causes bleeding and encephalitis. Yisrayl, which is an African virus that has killed 30% of the blackbirds in Vienna, Austria since 2001. Scrub typhus, a mite-borne infection, also known as Tsutsumagushi fever. The Nipah virus, which is a highly fatal disease from pigs. Malaria in the United States. The Isa virus, which causes a rabies-like disease, and mosquito-borne Chandapura virus, which is the cause of a large encephalitis outbreak in India. I'm going to skip down one sentence. It says, consider influenza, which has upset a number of dogmas in recent years. Until recently, scientists believed that new strains of influenza had to mix in pigs before the disease could be transmitted to humans. But now it is known that the virus can be transmitted directly from chickens and other birds to humans. Okay? It says in recent weeks, this was from March 9, 2004, but it says in recent weeks a deadly avian form of influenza has attacked millions of chickens and other birds in Asia, and experts here were not optimistic that health workers could contain a virus so widespread. They're groping in the dark on how to solve these problems. And it says most countries lack a detailed action plan for pandemic influenza. But if influenza struck today with the force of the 1918-1919 pandemic, participants at the meeting said that 1.8 million Americans would die. In the first book of Yisrayl, chapter 20 and verse 18, Pastor says, speaking of that, you really need to get those health products. This Aegis is the best I know to help get rid of those things out of your stomach because you have that army fighting for you. Yeshua ate fish continually. It was one of the few things that is reported that he did eat. He also ate red meat. That is also recorded. He did eat red meat. He was raised up on the laws of kosher meat. I am sure more care was taken with it than you see in the butcher shops today, trying to make a living the way the government is tightening down on them. Also in the first book of Yisrayl, chapter 23 and verse 65, Pastor says the suggestions that we will put into the minds of the Malachim, we will learn to do that. I'm talking about the heavenly Malachim, not the earthly Malachim, the presence of the elders. They are spoken of by Yahweh not only as Malachim, but Malachim Gadol, the mighty messengers. Once this power is achieved where you can actually control what is under the ground, what is on top of the ground, you can do it with the army available that Yahweh is going to give you power over. So let's review who's in this mighty army. We have Yahweh's Malachim, Yahweh's microbes, that includes the immune system, the death angel, and even the ones who form the weather pattern. Let me explain what the death angel is. Also in the book of Yisrayl, the seventh book of Yisrayl, 7th book of Yisrayl, part 2, chapter 24, verse 97, Pastor says, I didn't write this. The Catholic Church doesn't want us to print it. They don't want us to teach it. They don't want the people to know what is required for salvation. This is the reason that they're angry with us at this time and promoting persecution against the house of Yahweh, evil persecution that can get them killed. It could. It's been done before, Pastor says. Read all throughout the scripture where Yahweh says he's protecting his work and protects his work even to the point of letting the death angel come in and destroy people. It could take place again because he says his work is not going to stop. Praise Yahweh. In the 9th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 17 and verse 21. Pastor says, today it's getting out of hand in a lot of cases, and a lot of infants are dying from it, but that's because they have changed the atmosphere, so they're making wind-driven currents that will have a ball of these things coming here. And they will get in with the mother, the father, or the infant. Well, of course, at this moment in time, when he separated the Israelites from the Egyptians, he said, put this blood on your doorposts, and then this death angel, which is part of the firmament, will pass over you. It's like the wind. You can't see it, but you can certainly see when it attacks the infants, man or beast, They're going to die if there are enough of them there to do so. And Yahweh commanded that there be enough. That was his judgment, to allow this to show his power over the gods. Now let's look at some examples of when Yahweh protected his house. Alright, a long time ago, during the feast, it rained for 7 days straight. I believe it was the Feast of Tabernacles, but it was heavy pouring rain. And it never came near Yahweh's people, and Yahweh's people gladly enjoyed the feast. Also, a long time ago, our great overseer was told that the FBI was planning a raid, and Yahweh's witness was inspired to call them and say, well, we've done nothing wrong, but go ahead and come, and I'll show you every inch of the property. And again, Yahweh protected his work. In the year of 2008, Yisrayl Hawkins got arrested, and Yahweh's Malachim were around him. The judge set a ridiculous bond, but it was lowered, and pastor was released, and Yahweh protected his work again. During the Fukushima incident, there was heavy wind currents. Of course, there were the microbes that Yahweh sent, and they blew the radiation away from the house of Yahweh. I have a picture here. Alright, this is the radioactive particles from Japan that were detected in the United States. And if you can see, Alaska, Hawaii, California, and Nevada, Washington, Colorado, Florida, and other states. But you can see that it never comes near Texas, where we were. Also, a long time ago, there was a group of invaders that were planning to raid the 44, but Yahweh sent a heavy snowstorm that held back their plans. If you could turn to Psalms 91, this should be a very familiar scripture. Psalms 91. Yahweh promises us that he will protect us if we keep his laws. Psalms 91 says, under your shadow, O Yahweh, he who dwells, it's on page 470, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. We say to Yahweh, you are our refuge, you are our fortress, you are our Father, in you we will trust. Surely he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will trust. His truth will be your shield and your buckler. You will not be afraid of the terror of night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor of the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 will fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. Only with your eyes you will look, and you will see the reward of the wicked. Because you have made Yahweh your refuge, because you have made the Most High your house, the house of Yahweh. No evil will befall you, nor will any plague come near your dwelling. For he will give his Malachim charge concerning you, to keep you, protect you in all your ways. They will bear you up in their hands, so you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread upon the lion and the adder, the young lion and the dragon you will trample under feet. Yahweh says, because you have set your love upon me, I will deliver you, cause you to escape. I will set you on high, because you know my name. You will call me, and I will answer you. I will be with you in trouble, and I will deliver you, and I will honor you. And with long life I will satisfy you. I will show you my salvation, Yahshua Messiah. Praise Yahweh. That is a promise from Yahweh. That's a promise. Yahweh promises us that he will protect us if we keep his laws. It's conditional. In conclusion, I would like to let you know to trust in Yahweh. Because if we keep his laws, he will always send his army to come protect us. Always. That's all the time I have today. If y'all please stand. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the next speaker, the great Kahan Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. On this first day of Yahweh's new moon, first new moon of Abib, very, very exciting day. And if I didn't say it, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Are y'all ready for the showdown? You know, Pastor's been telling us that there's going to be a showdown here for quite some time. Here's the 9th book of Israel, chapter 26, in verse 9. He says, I pray that you'll be strong now and brace yourself and get ready for the battle, because there's going to be a showdown between Yahweh's house and Satan, this world of Satan's. And she's going to try to destroy the house. But remember, Yahweh says that the gates of Baal will not prevail against the house of Yahweh. Do you believe that? He also says here in the 14th book, part 2, more recently, and that's the reason we know there's going to be a showdown. It's already started, actually. The Pope has boasted that, I'm a hypocrite, and I'm saying I know it all. And I do. Yahweh is my Father. That may be the only truth that man's ever told. Speaking of Pope Francis. It's like the Big Bang. It's like he's trying to cover another falsehood, like Christmas, like Santa Claus. He's trying to cover the falsehood that they're worshiping the sun god. The sun god, his name is Baal. Okay, and the gates of Baal will not prevail against this great work in these last days. Now, last night, the great future priest, son of Yisrayl Abel, White Buffalo, just got done telling us Yahweh promises his people protection. But he only promises that protection if we keep his laws. And one of those laws is to gather together. Not only on Yahweh's Sabbaths, but on Yahweh's new moons. Okay, and feast days. Remember, the gathering of ourselves together. Well, last night, I had the privilege, and all of us had the privilege of gathering together here at Abel, and even the ones in the outlying areas that tuned in, gathered together here. Well, let me set you up for this. Did you know that last night, the new moon was actually spotted before the sun even went down? Okay? I have personally never seen that take place before. Okay? Maybe someone else knows more about that. But it was 4/8/16 when we all gathered together yesterday. And notice what it means. It means to gather. To gather. And it means gathered, gathering. Can you turn over to Hebrews real quick? Hebrews chapter 10. Hebrews 10. And we're going to be looking at verse 25. For starters, Hebrews 10, verse 25. And it says on page 949, not forsaking the gathering of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. Do we see the day approaching? The great day of Yahweh? It says, for if we sin willfully after we've received the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation which will devour the adversaries. Please turn over to Isaiah chapter 66. I want you to remember in your Book of Yahweh, there's 66 chapters in the Book of Yahweh. 66 books, I mean. And in Isaiah, there's 66 chapters, and we're going to look at verse 23. I'll give you a page number. Page 572, it says, for as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, will remain before me, says Yahweh, so will your seed and your name remain. And it will come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh will come. They will gather to worship me before me, says Yahweh. Okay, and they're going to go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm will not die, nor will their fire be quenched, and they will be an abhorrence to all flesh. Certainly wouldn't want to be in that category. But certainly we want to be in the category of gathering of ourselves together for this protection that Yahweh promises his people. Now, also remember Colossians 2:16. Colossians 2:16. You know, let's go ahead and turn there real quick. I want to get this one in there. Colossians 2:16. Very important. Found on page 926. It says, therefore, let no man condemn you for doing these things. Don't let no pope, preacher, or anybody tell you that you're sinning or doing something that you don't need to be doing. Let no one condemn you for eating and drinking in the observance of a feast day or of a new moon or of the Sabbath day. Okay, this gathering needs to take place on these times. Remember, these are your shadow of protection. Now, it just so occurs, let me show you another. 7:50 is when we spotted the moon, at 7:50 p.m. last night. Well, 7:50 in the Greek means the chief shepherd, whom we all know in these last times, Yahshua Messiah is the chief shepherd, a heavenly shepherd. We also have another beautiful shepherd that Yahweh gave us, right? Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins, under that shepherd. Now, 7:50 in the Hebrew, it means long. And I want you to notice, it means long as long of the pinion of the eagle. Pinion of the eagle. You know what the pinion of the eagle is? It's the wings. The wings. Under the wings of the great eagle, right? The wings. Or abiding under that shadow that the great son of Israel, Abel, just got done telling us about in Psalm 91. He who abides under the shadow of the Almighty, keeping his feasts, keeping his new moons, keeping his Sabbath days, those are the ones that will receive protection. Okay? No one else will. And we need to get this firmly grounded in our mind. As he said, this is a promise. And by the way, last night, just for your notes, the sun went down at 8:03 p.m. Now, I know you're going to come to me afterwards and you're going to say, well, on our calendar it says 8:04. But if you look on other sources on the news, you'll find it's actually 8:03. There might have been a misprint on the calendar. Okay? So, but it means foundation. Foundation. And it's from this word right here, which is 806. And notice what it means. Pillars. Remember, the pillar, the ground of the truth, the foundation of Yahweh stands sure, having this seal. Yahweh knows those who are his, because those who reverence Yahweh depart from what? Evil. They depart from evil. They turn from sin. They sin never again. 803 in the Greek, right here, Notice what Yahweh gives us here. Security, reliability, firmness. Can you ask for much more than that? He who abides under the shadow of Yahweh, this is what they receive. A sure foundation, a secure foundation, a trustworthy foundation. Notice here it's from 804, and it means because it says it's secure because it's on solid footing. It's on solid footing. And what is that solid footing that the house of Yahweh is established upon? The laws of Yahweh and the prophecies of Yahweh, okay? It is firm. It is not going to be moved. The gates of Baal will never prevail again. Now they're going to try. They're going to try. On August 28th of last year, here's the date. It was announced, here's the Washington Post, the destruction of the temple of Baal. Oh, sorry. I think I need to get a pen for that thing. It says, before and after images show the destruction of Palmyra's treasured temple. It says, on Tuesday, the Islamic State released, by the way, Tuesday would have been 8/25. Does that ring a bell? The, not a Baal, a bell, okay? 8/25 was when Pastor saw his first donkey vision in 2011. Y'all remember that? On 8/25, the Islamic State released video showing the destruction of the treasured Baal Shamim temple in the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra. The temple, now get this, because this is very important, the temple, which is part of a UNESCO, that's United Nations, by the way, World Heritage Site, was considered one of the Middle East's most archaeologically precious buildings. Yes, the Edomites, the great red dragon, Satan on the 7 hills, it's very precious to them. Okay? What is precious to you, house of Yahweh? Is it Baal's temple? It says, now the UN satellite program, UNISAT, has confirmed the temple's destruction by empowering satellite image... I can't read this. By comparing satellite images taken on June 26th. Keep that date in your mind, because remember, June 26th is when the United States Supreme Court passed their gay marriage law. And August 27th, which was the day they saw that this thing was destroyed. So they took a picture on June 26th, and then on August 27th, it was not there. In other words, ISIS claimed they blew it up. Okay, now this Temple of Baal. Temple of Baal, I want you to notice this. It was founded in 32 AY, after Yeshua. Okay? It was founded in 32. Keep that number in your mind. It says the area here was occupied in pre-Roman periods with a former temple that is usually referred to as the first temple of Baal and the Hellenistic temple. Now this was a very, very important temple to the Baal worshiping world. Now, so what does that have to do with the price of tea today? Or the price of coffee here? Well, here's what's taking place now. It says the Palmyra Ark that survived ISIS is going to be replicated in London and New York. Well, and where is this going to be? Where are they going to put up this ark? It says made in Shanghai, finished in Italy, probably at the Vatican, right? Then it's going to be built like a Legos in Trafalgar Square. Okay? Trafalgar Square, or what do they call that? Trafalgar Square, or I can't remember. That's in New York. But guess what? That ain't the only place they're putting it. This came out March 19th, 2016. It says, this is from the New York Times, next month the Temple of Baal will come to where? Times Square. Oh, whose face is shining down right now? That's right, Yisrayl Hawkins. Now, isn't this just like the prophets of Baal to do something like this? To challenge the prophet of Yahweh? Remember the 450 prophets of Baal and the one prophet of Yahweh? And who prevailed in that case there? Well, I don't see Pastor putting on guns or strapping on a sword, or I don't see him shaking in his boots or anything like that. I don't see anything like that taking place. I see a peaceful teaching of the law taking place, which will continue to take place, right? Because who will fight who will fight Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins' battle for him? Yahweh. That's right, Yahweh will. Yahweh is his confidence in these last days, okay? Now, I want to also show you this here. It says that the UN and UNESCO condemn the destruction of the Temple of Baal. Yes, they condemned its destruction because, as it will be explained as time goes on, this is a very important high place. Because, the Edomites, the red dragon, they always wanted to have the high places in their possession. If you remember in the book of Obadiah. Okay? And as a matter of fact, the UN has the highest outpost on the top of Mount Hermon. Okay? A UN outpost on the top of Mount Hermon, where all the Baal temples, some of the caves where they worship Baal on the side of the mountain, they actually have that in their possession. Because they want all these high places to Baal, because that's who they worship. They worship the sun god. Now, who is UNESCO? Now, y'all remember the Year of Light? You remember the Year of Light? Well, who do you think sponsored that? Well, it was UNESCO. Remember? The Year of Lucifer? Or Baal, the sun god? Now, let me show you what they tell you UNESCO's for. It's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is just a front. It's a front for teaching God worship to the whole world, under all these banners, under the banner of education, under the banner of science and technology. Its purpose is to contribute to peace. Really? By putting up a temple of Baal in Times Square, they're contributing to peace. To peace and security by promoting international collaboration through educational, scientific, and cultural reforms in order to increase, get this, universal respect for justice, the rule of law, that President George W. Bush Sr. told you on his New World Order speech, the rule of law instead of the rule of the jungle. Remember this New World Order, and human rights along with the fundamental freedom proclaimed in the United Nations Charter. Remember that UN Charter. It says UNESCO's aim is to contribute for the building of peace, the eradication of poverty, sustainable development, climate change, alert, alert, Baal alert, Route 66 alert, intercultural dialogue through education, the sciences, culture, communication, and information. In other words, nothing but a bunch of propaganda. And notice where it's headquartered. Paris, France, the city of light, the city of Lucifer. Because remember, oh, by the way, the UN Charter was signed, UN Charter, signed June 26, 1945, same date as their homosexual marriage law. Remember that? This was brought out before in none other than San Francisco. San Francisco. That sure comes up a lot, doesn't it? San Francisco. Must be a coincidence. St. Francis of Assisi, or Isis, spelled backwards. By the way, UNESCO's International Year of Light, let me bring this out. Notice what it says here, UNESCO, building peace in the minds of men and women. Yes, building peace. Really? The only peace builders that I know are sitting right here, because they have the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, and everyone in Africa and China and everywhere else that follows the Peaceful Solution and teaches it, they're building the hearts and the minds of men, because they're putting Yahweh's laws into the hearts and minds, as Hebrews 10:26 says. By the way, France, I remember telling you not long ago that France extended its International Year of Light celebration until June 2016. That must mean that they got some really cool stuff coming up for us, huh? In this year of Lucifer? What do you think? What kind of plans do you think they have? Now, this came out just a couple days ago. This was on mainstream news, brothers and sisters. This is on the Drudge Report. Demonic arches rising in New York and London on April 19th. Welcome signs for the Antichrist. Now, since when did you know that the mainstream media thought anything of an Antichrist? Well, remember, there's a great deception coming. Let me show you some events. They're going to put these up in Times Square and all these other places on April 19th. In history, on April 19th, you had the Oklahoma City bombing. You had the Waco massacre, April 19th, 1993. You had the Virginia Tech massacre. You had Columbine High, Boston bombings, so on and so forth, because Baal needs these blood fire sacrifices, okay? Because it's the time of the year known as Beltane. Beltane, its actual date is May 1st or May Day. Remember the maypole and all those things Pastor wrote about in the Devil Worship book. Let me show you something here, though. Here's where they celebrate it. They actually celebrate it on April 30th through May 1st in the Northern Hemisphere, and October 31st in the other parts of the world, Southern Hemisphere, beginning at sunset. Does anybody know what's going on April 30th? Last day of the Feast of Passover? Let me show you something else, some other deception coming out here. I hope I got 2 minutes left. Here's some deception coming out. If you type in May 5th Antichrist, all these videos are popping up and all this news is coming out everywhere about May 5th, rise of the Antichrist and end of days. But when you watch the actual video, there's no mention of it anywhere. It talks about end time events, but it's not saying anything about an Antichrist. Why? Who's putting all these things out here? By the way, if you didn't catch UNESCO, just think Vatican. UN. Vatican, right? Well, on 5516, if you look that up in the Greek, it means 666. Now, somebody must know something, you think? Something funny going on here. Now, this temple of Baal was built in 32 AD and destroyed in 2015. That's 1983 years. What was established in 1983? That's right, the house of Yahweh. But, now they're seeking to rebuild it. In 2016, they're going to put these gates, remember the gates, in New York City, the gates of the Temple of Baal, right there by where Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins is, in the gathering place called Times Square, also called the Great White Way, and a lot of other names you're going to learn about one day. That's 1984 years later, and it means to shine, foolish, make a boast, renown, shine. Well, lo and behold, that's exactly what Bel, the sun god, means the shining one. The shining one, the shining God, the sun god. Do you think this is a coincidence, House of Yahweh? No. Are you afraid? No. I didn't think you would be. Because the gates of hell or Baal will never, ever prevail against the great house of Yahweh ever again. Are you ready for the showdown? Well, remember, first we got a feast coming up, the hoedown before the showdown. Right? So get ready for the feast. It's going to be the greatest feast ever. And at this time, if you'd all please stand, I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Of course, continuing along with the misery we see in today's world, we start off with the refugees that are in Greece. And of course, to watch them reminds you a lot of the Dust Bowl whenever they were traveling out to California and no one wanted to help them, and these, what they considered Okies, were called trash of the earth. Well, you have these people that are now in Greece that they're now deporting back to Syria. And watch these people and really try to attach yourself to what these people are going through. Show some empathy with these people who are saying it would have been better off to die in Syria. We would have never left, because they're offering them nothing. They're considered, and look at what they're living in. Look at the conditions they have and see how blessed we truly are to be where we're at. And then, of course, we hear about the droughts in Texas. Even with the rain, we're still in drought, and then the droughts in California. But now Venezuela and, of course, Ethiopia are rationing water. Venezuela is actually shutting water off for days at a time due to severe drought, and they don't have enough water to take care of their people. And then a man in Virginia was released from prison this week after serving 33 years for a crime they can now prove that he did not commit. But listen to how he was tried. He was tried through the news. Through the news, putting out he had done this, he must have done that, he surely did this, just to come out later to find out this man spent 33 years of his life in prison for a crime he did not commit, but he was convicted through media. And then you also have hospice. Now, I'm not saying this about all hospice, but a hospice in North Texas, of course, they're trying to save money. It was found that they were actually sending messages to their attendees who were attending those who were receiving the treatment to actually help them journey along a little quicker, actually encouraging them to overdose the patient so they did not have to spend more time with them to save money. Think about how the love of many have grown cold and what this healthcare system is truly about, and how this sin, there's no way to win with sin. There's no way whatsoever to win with sin. And then, of course, sending your children to public schools. Well, now they're showing that there's candy in these schools. It looks just like what you know as a Smartie. It's a little pink pill. Looks just like one of those candies, but it's actually meth. And children are eating them. And the schools are surprised that these things are in the schools, which surprises me that they're surprised they're in the schools, because drugs have been in school for a long time. The 1980 Just Say No campaign didn't really say no. It just helped it build. But watch how these things are getting into the schools. And of course, Aleppo in Syria, there was a bombing this week, and they're showing how gas was used. Think about what that's putting men, women, and children through by gassing these people. What kind of love is being shown? What kind of peace can be achieved through these actions? And then, of course, there's a bill coming through. North Carolina and Mississippi is pushing this bill, but watch it very carefully. It's called the Religious Freedom Act. There's more to it than what's being shown right now, but right now, of course, the LGBT communities are standing against it because it allows them to refuse service to anybody who they deem is not within their religious standards. They're saying homosexuality, but if you dress modestly, you'll fall right in those categories. But it's actually the ability to refuse service to anyone that does not fall within the business owner's religious standards that they hold that should be done. And then, of course, in San Antonio this week, we had a shooting at the Air Force Base, another shooting at our military bases. 2 people were killed. A man shot his commanding officer. And there's no peace through war. No matter whether you're on the base or you're fighting the war, there's no peace. And then Russia actually complaining now that the United States has not destroyed all of the weapons-grade plutonium that they said they would destroy. Now, of course, I'm sure Vladimir Putin is aware that the United States has plans on destroying these things, but it's not the way he thinks. The United States has their own way, and we know there's a great nuclear burning to come. And diabetes now has quadrupled since the 1980s. Quadrupled. Think about how many people, now this is known cases, and remember what we brought out earlier about California and the pre-diabetes. Well, these things come through sin, through not keeping Yahweh's laws. And then the hand, foot, and mouth disease is spreading, it seems like, through all over Texas. They've talked about it this last week. And it's bacteria, and of course it spread very easily. They're saying through saliva, children, shopping carts. Listen to how they say it spread. And of course they say you have to let it run its course. There's nothing you can do for it once you have it. You got to let it run its course. And then we have a section where Pastor brought out about the elephant and herpes being found in elephants. And I think that'll explain itself very clearly. And then I want to read you something very quickly. Of course, this last week, a man was actually arrested. A 2-year-old showed up at a local hospital here in Abelin. The youngster tested positive for gonorrhea. And I think that explains itself and how that took place. A youngster testing positive for gonorrhea. Well, also, the Pope this last week brought out what he thinks should be the modern day families. These modern day families, this is what we should truly have. And I want to refer you back to this before I tell you about the last article in the book, the booklet, The True Stories About Christmas. Pastor says the original Babylonian mother goddess was Semiramis. The adorned little child in her arms was Ninus, signified the sun. In Egypt, where the mother and child worship spread, notice in Egypt, where it spread, was worshipped as Osiris. Osiris was represented in Egypt as the son and husband of his mother, and actually bore the name husband of the mother. Now, of course, Semiramis, through her scheming, became the Babylonian queen of heaven. She introduced a worship. Now, remember, in Egypt, remember what they told Yeshua, we've never been in bondage. You may have been in bondage, but we wouldn't. Well, this worship came from there, and of course, in this ancient act of sun worship, as the great Kahan was just speaking about, women would ceremonially weep until Tammuz was reincarnated as the evergreen tree, which was the birth of this god. Of course, in Egypt, Osiris, the sun god, the son husband of Isis, was born on December 25th. That's the reintroducing of this sun god, this husband, son, husband. And of course, there's a new thing. It's not as new as you think it is, but it's not called what we would call it from the Book of Yahweh. There's a new technical term, and it's called GSA. And the news will explain it very delicately, but it's known as genetic fill-in-the-blank attraction. And truly, the sins have reached their heaven, because you'll see, what is it like to date my dad? Me date my dad. The son marrying the mothers, the fathers dating the daughters. And this is the worship where they put these Christmas trees up in their house. They teach their children these abominations. They defile the earth, and it brings forth utter confusion. There is no way we should sit here and not put forth every ounce of energy to put an end, not by sword, not by might, but by the every word of Yahweh, to put an end to this utter, disgusting confusion. If we could go ahead and please play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and as it is foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, displaced, stressed, and abused refugees in the news again. Hospice health care services only concerned about profits. Drugs that look like candy, targeting young people. And is incest becoming society's new normal? Well, that's just some of the disturbing stories that we'll be covering in today's broadcast. But we start off with the Syrian migrants along the Greek border and them being in the place that they're in right now in hopes of getting to a better place where they can actually settle. Syrian mother Miriam Mohammed is very sorrowful because of the state of affairs that she and her family are in right now. She said in an interview, "I regret that we left Syria every day. It would have been better to die in Damascus. At least you know that you would have died in your own country and would have been buried in your country. But here, we're dying a slow death, our children and us." So it would have been better to actually stay in a war-torn country than to go to a place where the people are being treated so horribly.
That's terrible. War on one side and rejection on the other.
That's right.
Well, in that migrant camp, which also borders Macedonia, many try to make the best of their situation, while buses used to take migrants to an official reception center sits empty. In Piraeus, migrants are making some progress as they board buses, preparing to settle in Greece, while others will settle or will be sent, rather, to Turkey. Now, for many, it will be the uncertain future, one in which they hope for the best, but so far have experienced some of the worst conditions ever.
That's right. While some of those on the Greek border and elsewhere are beginning to settle in Greece and Turkey, others who are already in Europe are being sent home, about 200 so far, with more to follow. This comes as the result of a new deal between the European Union and Turkey. Migrants are bussed into the city of Lesbos, bound, their hands being bound, and they're also escorted with chaperones, each one, as they are put on a boat. Now this because the Greek authorities said none of the migrants had applied for asylum in Europe.
This while thousands of others are constantly risking their lives to cross from Turkey to Greece in boats that are very unfit for the sea as they flee from the war in Syria and Iraq. Now, refugee camps have now become detention centers. On the island of Chios, migrants frustrated with their treatment broke out of the detention camp and were actually took to the streets.
Boris Chichakov, spokesman for the United Nations Refugee Agency, said, "If someone is seeking asylum, it's not a crime." He fears that Europe's determination to stop the migrants could mean that some of them aren't being given the protection that they deserve. He also said they have to be given an individual process so that they can explain why they need to stay because they fear for their lives.
In Calais, France, over 75% of the refugees living in a camp known as the Jungle say they've experienced police violence. Now, that information, according to the Refugee Rights Data Project, of the 800 refugees interviewed, over 50% feared for their safety. 65% said they had to use blankets or burn garbage to keep warm, and 75% complained of health problems.
Yeah, I bet those camps aren't really a healthy place to be. And that's right. Human rights groups criticize French governments for the camp's conditions, while French authorities have forcefully evicted people using tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons. So far, about 6,000 refugees are living in France, and Europe is struggling to cope with the biggest influx of refugees since World War II.
Well, Venezuela is experiencing a water crisis of their own. With water at an all-time low, the country is rationing water by shutting off water to the taps of many homes and businesses. Now, one man, Fernando Lozano, a resident of the city of Caracas, has been storing the water when it's on so he has enough water to get him through the periods when it's turned off. Now, the government is blaming a particularly long drought and the fact that one of the city's 3 reservoirs is empty. So the environmental minister gave the command for the water cuts.
That's right. Others say the problem stems from years of inadequate maintenance and a system that, when fully operating, falls short of demand. Mr. Lozano continued by saying, "I don't know who's right, but we the people are suffering. What we need are solutions," he said, solutions from the regional or national government or the city, whoever is responsible for this. The city's rationing of water could cause More protests on the streets, adding to the already frustrating situation there in Caracas due to a lack of necessary items growing shorter in availability.
The government hopes that the rationing will end by mid-September, but seasons are unreliable, so people like Fernando are preparing themselves to learn how to live without running water.
Well, that's wise. Continuing with the effects of a widespread drought, over 6 million Ethiopian children face malnutrition due to food shortage as well as waterborne diseases. Currently, about 30 million people are affected by the drought in Ethiopia, and more than 1/3 of them are in need of emergency food assistance.
The country is urging the world to donate more food aid as the drought intensifies. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the African drought of the 1980s, and in fact, Khatan, this is the worst drought the nation has seen in the last 50 years.
Yeah, we're seeing that drought take its toll on more and more countries in many, many ways. Well, how would you feel if you spent the last 30-plus years of your life behind bars because of a bite mark? Only to find out that, well, you didn't have to spend one day in prison. One man just went through that exact thing and was released from prison, minus, of course, 30 years of his life. Well, take a look at what he had to say after his release at a press conference courtesy of WRIC.
The egos of those criminals, and I say criminals because I'm talking about the people in Newport News that had me convicted, detectives, prosecutors, judges, forensic scientists, they went out of their way to convict me. They weren't looking for the truth, they were looking for a conviction. Anytime I speak to anybody and tell them that my case was settled on bite mark evidence, they say, no, there's no way. Well, here's proof that it did happen. And we need to stop that. I'm not the criminal. The Attorney General's done said that. The Supreme Court said I'm not the criminal. The criminals are those people back in Newport News that fabricated this lie. That's the worst part about this, is my parents. It killed them. It devastated them. I mean, at the trial, I mean, like my brother said, he's never seen my father cry. It broke his heart. And they knew. You're doing great. And I'll never get that back. I couldn't go to their funeral because those criminals in Newport News. And somebody needs to pay for this.
Well, definitely a lot of lost time there that man is never going to be able to get back.
That's right.
Hospice care, a service provided for the terminally ill who's nearing the end of their lives. Now, their job is to keep the patient comfortable and treat their pain and symptoms of their illness until the patient dies. Well, not all hospice services are created equal. While some actually care about the lives and the sufferings of those they care for, others only care about eliminating the suffering of the loss of profits.
Wow. In a report by RT, they reported on a North Texas health care center called Novus Healthcare Services, a company that displays on their website saying that we treat people the way we would want to be treated themselves, and that they go the extra mile, they also said, to make patients feel comfortable and secure. Well, the FBI in an investigation has found that the owner, Brett Harris, has routinely instructed his nurses to give his hospice patients overdoses of drugs like morphine to speed up their deaths.
Wow. Well, oddly enough, the faster a hospice patient dies, the more money a hospice center can make. Harris allegedly sent text messages to his nurses telling them, you need to make this patient go bye-bye, while instructing them to give 4 times the maximum medication allowed, according to the FBI.
Wow. It is also reported that Harris told his nurses to find patients that would die in 24 hours and also have nurses sign papers that needed a doctor's signature in which they would actually forge the name of a doctor and send that patient home to die even though they still needed that hospice care, all just to save money. Reason being, the longer people stay in hospice, well, the more it costs.
Medicaid and Medicare pays for hospice care, but has caps on how much money is given out. So if a patient lives longer than expected, it costs the hospice place money, sometimes even having to repay the government. Therefore, the way to make money in the hospice business is to find people who qualify for the Medicare and Medicaid and will die quickly. And that is just what Harris, and this, of course, according to the FBI, took place, even if he forced them, is what they're saying, to speed their death and, of course, get the money. So definitely no compassion there with that hospice place.
Yeah, that's a sad situation. Well, drugs of another kind are also causing concern this week. We have our correspondent Larry McGee tracking that, as well as several other important stories. Larry, what do you have for us?
Fears concerning narcotics in children is not just for big cities anymore. In small towns such as Ione, California, parents are being notified that methamphetamines have been discovered in the possession of certain children disguised as Smartie candies. Principal Bill Murray of Ione Junior High School says one student is reported to have taken the drugs himself before offering another student the option to participate. In offering a word of observation on the phenomenon, a parent and resident of Ione commented that in your worst nightmares, your children do drugs. The nightmare of Syria continues to grow more horrifying and intense after mercenaries were reported to have launched a chemical attack against Kurdish soldiers in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Footage is now surfacing showing victims gasping and attempting to recover following the attack, which is one of the latest in a string of hostile engagements between multiple groups, all vying to conquer and control Aleppo for its strategic importance. The events are being regarded as a violation of the ceasefire negotiated by the United States and Moscow. There is no negotiation, however, where many states are concerned on the controversial issue of mixed-gender restrooms, and no let-up on the economic sanctions being imposed by certain elements of the American business community for those who dare not to support them. PayPal is the latest organization to cancel business plans in North Carolina, scrapping its plans to build a new facility offering 400 jobs due to a new state law prohibiting mixed-gender restrooms. 21 states, mostly southern, have all instituted similar legislation to support the religious views of business owners and allow them to decline services to those they deem morally offensive. Mississippi is thought to be running out front on the stands after passing its religious freedom law, which allows business and government personnel alike to deny services based on religious beliefs. The law applies to marriage licenses, jobs, and housing, and bars state government from intervening once religious beliefs are the reason provided. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant signed it into law and stated for the record that he believes that it protects the religious freedom of those who have deeply held religious beliefs. So did the legislature, so did the majority of the people of Mississippi, and so they signed it into law. Companies such as Chevron, MGM Resorts, and Nissan all expressed criticism and stated that their policy is to prohibit discrimination of any type.
As opposed to the position taken up by other businessmen, Mitchell Moore, who owns Campbell's Bakery in downtown Jackson, says that if a gay couple walks into his bakery and asks for a wedding cake, he would sell it to them because that's what he does. He sells cakes. The registered Republican thinks the law is a big misstep and says that while he is Christian, he does not believe that Christianity tells them that he has to discriminate against people. He believes his job is to serve people, not turn them away.
Despite the threat of economic exclusion, however, 8 more states are said to have similar legislation pending. The military is reeling from a personal blow this week after one of the 82,000 people at Lackland Medina Annex in San Antonio, Texas, opened fire and killed 2 people. Brig General Bob Lubruda says the incident was not terrorist related, but was simply an instance of someone going off. In other military news, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that America's failure to eliminate its holdings of weapons-grade plutonium is the reason why he declined participation in a recent nuclear summit. The Russian head is calling on the U.S. to keep their word, according to the U.S.-Russian agreement negotiated in early 2000 regarding weapons-grade plutonium. Over 50 heads of state were invited to the two-day summit to discuss the acquisition of nuclear material and preventing ISIS from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Russia did in fact boycott the gathering as tension continues to mount between it and the U.S. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, that's definitely going to be hard to fix the relationship between the U.S. and Russia if we have people not keeping their word.
That's right.
Well, the World Health Organization has released its first ever global report on diabetes. The report shows how there has been a huge rise in diabetes since the 1980s. Now, diabetes is a chronic disease emerging when the patient's body does not produce enough insulin or cannot effectively use the insulin it produces.
That's right. There are now 422 million people suffering globally with the disease. That number has quadrupled in less than 40 years. According to the World Health Organization, in 2012 alone, diabetes caused 1.5 million deaths. Its complications are serious, often leading to heart attack, stroke, blindness, kidney failure, and lower limb amputation. The WHO has warned the disease has spread due to changes in the way people eat, move, and live.
In the past, the highest rates of diabetes were seen in developed countries. However, that trend has now changed, and in most cases, the increases are found in developing countries. Now, the UN Health Agency has also found that diabetes has become more common among men than women. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, warns that people must take action so this number does not continue to grow at such a rapid rate.
Well, if your child has had a fever recently, you might want to listen up, says KLBC News out of Lubbock. One pediatrician has seen several cases of hand, foot, and mouth disease already this spring. Michelle Jeffcoat, the mother of a healthy 1-year-old, had a terrible experience with it. Miss Jeffcoat told KLBC she noticed 2 bumps on her otherwise healthy 1-year-old's finger. Having worked at a daycare, she knew what it could be and that it in fact was the hand, foot, and mouth disease. So she looked at her toes and found more bumps.
While the baby did not get a very bad case of the virus, Michelle did. Now, after caring for her son, she broke out with blisters all over her hands and feet, which then spread to her face. Now, Jeffcoat said she was absolutely miserable.
I bet. Dr. Nal Zitoni, a pediatrician in Lubbock, says this is the time of year for a seasonal outbreak of hand, foot, and mouth disease. The disease typically occurs in toddlers, but no one is immune. The doctor warns it's highly contagious, and is passed through saliva.
And Katan, they give the very familiar scenario of the child who's drooling on a shopping cart and then it's not being wiped down. So then the next child sits in and comes in contact with that saliva, maybe even putting their fingers in their mouth or on the cart. And then after they touch the cart, it just continues to spread. Now, the doctor says daycares are also guilty of spreading it since hand, foot, and mouth can live on a toy surface for several hours, and of course many children play with many different toys, and there it's very quickly spread.
Oh boy, that's pretty scary. Well, symptoms of the virus include fever, sore throat, blisters, and pain. And there is no medication currently to treat the virus. Doctors say it has to run its course, which lasts about a week. Michelle Jeffcoat wants other mothers to be careful, saying, wash your hands and sanitize your carts at Walmart, and make sure your kids aren't putting their mouths on things at restaurants. It's horrible, so really take care of yourselves.
Well, Shantae is a pregnant Asian elephant at the Houston Zoo, and she is due to give birth in April. Now, while the zoo is excited about the birth, they are also planning for the new calf to be the most monitored and tested calf that they've ever had at the Houston Zoo. Shantae is not a first-time mom, but in 2008, her calf named Mac, just in his second year of life, died of a herpes infection. And that is why Shantae's new calf will be so highly monitored.
Oh, that's sad. It occurs in Asian elephants. Several in U.S. zoos have died from the virus. Since Mac's death, the Houston Zoo and Baylor College of Medicine have teamed up to speed up the diagnosis time. Baylor, just blocks from the zoo, now tests samples from elephant trunk washings, blood, and eye secretions several times a week.
Already, Baylor's research indicates the virus may be spread among elephants through secretions from the trunk. Now, Baylor is monitoring the lab tests from the herd should there be a problem with an adult or newborn. Of course, they're trying to find it and identify it as quickly as possible to stop the death.
It's amazing that elephants are actually suffering this disease. Well, the National Zoo has also been studying elephant herpes for years, first described at the National Zoo by Laura Richmond in 1999 after one of their elephants died of the disease. In the last 5 years, as more cases have been identified, research has found that the elephant herpes virus is really at least 8 different viruses with many different subtypes, mutations.
Well, of those known elephant herpesviruses, some of them are quite different from the others. Some of the genes are so different that scientists were not able to pull them out of some of the viruses, commenting the genes are just too different. So you can see it's not just one, but many different herpes viruses, and some they're not even able to identify.
Sounds like it's far from the original genes that were supposed to be there. Well, Pope Francis has once again excited Catholics as he released a major document on sex, marriage, and family life this past week. His document demands that the Church shift emphasis from doctrine to mercy. In an exhortation entitled The Joy of Love, the pontiff said Catholics should look to their own conscience rather than relying exclusively on church rules.
On the issue of contraception, Francis stressed that a couple's individual conscience should play a role. He also called for new language to help families cope with today's problems, saying that pastors must take into account mitigating factors in counseling Catholics who aren't perfect.
The Pope says nobody can be condemned forever. The message continues Francis's efforts to broaden the Church's base of devotees.
Well, Father Robert Gull said many people were hoping that the Pope would somehow change doctrine, but Pope Francis understands himself as the Pope. He's Catholic. The Pope is very interested in families or couples who never get married at all and couples who don't have children. And he sees this as a real problem in society, the demographic implosion of the need for this openness of generosity to life. Now, Katan, I don't know if you can understand that, but sometimes these fathers speak and it seems like it's so far reserved from any type of logic. It's kind of hard to understand what he's saying.
Very confusing. Well, continuing along these lines, incest. Yeah, some of you are probably cringing right now. Sexual relations between biological siblings or parents and children is now being considered totally normal. Yeah. In fact, the term incest is now preferably called genetic sexual attraction.
Trying to soften it down a little bit.
Soften up the discuss there. GSA for short. A recent story of a Britain mother who is having sex with her biological son and planning to get married and have a baby has brought the subject from the back burner to the forefront.
Well, with much of society's focus on accepting people who are gay as being totally normal, this next step of accepting incest is gaining popularity. Supporters of GSA argue if two consenting adults want to engage in a sexual relationship together, then what's the problem? We're following the pattern that they have prescribed for society, that they have demanded that society follow.
So you see that those things that are considered normal in society kind of changes with the demands or the desires of the people within society. So basically, Jeff, they're saying if two consenting adults or two consenting adults, like a mother and the son, or in another case, a girl who's having sex with her father, her biological father, they're actually saying that now this is considered totally normal.
That's correct. And they're even taking it so far to say that if you think that their attraction is bizarre or as a result of some type of mental illness, you're the one discriminating against them.
Oh, amazing.
Well, Dr. Drew Pinsky, host of Dr. Drew, which explores the fundamental question why we do what we do, serves as assistant clinical professor of psychiatry at the Keck USC School of Medicine. Dr. Drew interviewed two young ladies who were in a genetic sexual attraction relationship with their biological fathers.
Well, Dr. Drew asked Julie, one of the young ladies, to explain her story. She said, "My father and I reunited last year, and we had a great reunion. It was very emotional. One of the key things that happened was we realized how much time had gone by since there was, and of course, as a result of that realization, there was a lot of grief. And this sort of propelled us into this sort of intense hyper relationship where we were constantly communicating, constantly trying to find out more about each other. And the more we got to know, well, the more we realized how much we were connected," she said.
Well, Dr. Drew asked if there was a sexual component to their relationship. Julie replied, "Well, there wasn't at first. What happened was I actually said to my husband, I said, I feel the same feelings that I felt when I fell in love with you. I feel like I'm falling in love." And you could think, man, that the husband must have felt terrible hearing his own wife say that now she's having these feelings for a different man, much less her own father.
Yeah, normally you would think that, but Julie continued by explaining her husband actually understood what she was talking about, stating, "Because our daughters, 3 and 4, 3 or 4 years old at the time, they actually would express their desire to marry their father. They would come down in dresses and say, 'Daddy, marry me.' They have this heroic awe for their father, and so I never got to do that with my father, so I started to feel that, but I'm an adult, so I was really confused." And it sounds like there's a lot of confusion in the minds. Of course, they're talking to Dr. Drew, who deals with psychiatry, in the minds of these people who make these decisions, and of course, things kind of get out of hand.
Well, confused is right. As Pope Francis tells people to follow their conscience and don't worry about the rules of the Bible, mankind continues to lose their senses. Well, science has proven time and time again that what the Bible teaches is absolutely necessary for mankind to have healthy, joyful lives. Now, Yisrayl Hawkins has been the only one enlightening the scientific world for over 40 years now with the knowledge of the Holy Scriptures and how this guideline for mankind must be followed. Well, Pope Francis, you can have your defiled conscience and your who am I to judge attitude, but to our viewers, if you want to come out of this world and avoid the sicknesses and diseases that come with this lifestyle of illicit sexual relations that Pope Francis says is perfectly fine, then contact the House of Yahweh today and get to studying with the greatest teacher in the world, Yisrayl Hawkins.
When you contact the House of Yahweh, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com, or also visit www.ypnnews.com. You can also email them at info@yahweh.com. And of course, all calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And don't forget the latest and greatest study resource available on the internet today. You can visit www.yisraelsays.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is Yisrayl Hawkins' response to Pope Francis's statement, "Let your conscience be your guide." Well, from all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
You may be seated for a moment. Considering all these things and think about this confusion that the Catholic Church is bringing and all of this abomination that we see, consider all the things of this world that we're told to remember, to come out from amongst them, my people, in Revelations 18:4, and partake not of their ways. And then remember what Micaiah chapter 4 verses 1 through 3 says, that they will come up to the house of Yahweh and they will learn of Yahweh's ways. What we're seeing in this world, of course, is the ways of this world. There are the ways that came forth from Egypt that was taught by Cain, that, of course, is part of this Nimrod system, that is this Nimrod system, this system of rebellion, the system of sowing discord, the system of sowing one abomination after another, as we see the mutations they talked about with the elephants, to where they can't even break these genes down. They can't separate them. They cannot pull them apart. They're having a tough time. But notice these very simplistic things that even the youngest of children could go to these college graduates, these people of higher education. Our children here could explain, this is why you're seeing what you're seeing in these people. That's something everyone should applaud to, for the fact. Think about this for a moment. You know, when you consider what Pastor has said, that if you go this way and you walk this way, dying you will die. Isn't it amazing? They don't consider that prophecy when he tells them in advance what will be the end of their ways if they continue to go that way. Well, of course, there is one person, there is one teacher, and only one instructor that can bring this world to complete peace. And at this time, if you'll please stand, I'd like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Shalom, everyone. Are you ready? Woo! You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The news there is great. Doing what just the world said, Yahweh said the world was going to do. And, of course, the news here is great. We're doing what Yahweh said we're going to do. I felt so joyous coming here this morning. Everything was perfect. I could see Yahweh's plan everywhere I looked. The news for the house of Yahweh, most read within past 30 days. The most read articles in the past 30 days. Now this is information that anyone can get on news articles. Most popular headlines, most read articles in the last 30 days. Yisrayl Hawkins speaks on gay rights and what the Bible really says about it. But that's not the top one now. That's the most read too, but that was 30 days ago. The latest press releases. And they say it twice. I'm reading it twice. Most popular headlines. They have some advertisements in front of it. Orthopedic specialist and so forth. But the most read, most popular, latest releases, Yisrayl Hawkins says a gathering will take place that will exceed Moses and the Exodus in new article. This is the newspapers putting this out by the thousands and the millions. The article, I got to show you this picture, if I can get it to where you can see it. Let me come back here. This is the crew really did a fabulous job on this picture. I got to get that truck, that bus in there. That bus plays a part right there where my finger is. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a wall of water on each side. Here, this is coming out of Egypt, but it's in trucks, cars, and coming to the house of Yahweh, which you can't see it in this, but maybe you can. Yeah, you can. It's faint though, but right here at the end is the house of Yahweh. And the headline there, if you can read it, it's there you go. That's pretty big. Now, right there is also where the Baal temple is going up to try to give us some competition. But to me, that's like taking candy from a baby, really. The house of Yahweh. The Pope emphasizes flexibility over rules for modern families. Now, you can really get the picture of the Catholic Church here. You can get the picture of the Coptics before the Catholic Church, the Coptic Catholics in Egypt, and then your elders in Israel that was brought out of Egypt, the 12 tribes. I told you last week that Moshe didn't promise them righteousness. He said nothing about righteousness to them, unless he said it and it wasn't recorded. He said, I'm going to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, and we'll make out of you the greatest nation ever, and things like that. And then they get there, and they're looking for this land flowing with milk and honey. And the milk and honey was there, but they rejected it. Look up milk and honey, and you'll see that it refers to Yahweh's prophecies and laws. Milk and honey. If they hadn't have been so dumb. Well, anyway, after the laws, after Yahweh then gave them the laws, this is when the Coptic Catholics rejected Moshe, and they said, we're all holy. Why are you giving us this new set of laws to follow now? Why are you putting yourself above us now? We're all holy here. And of course their actions was follow your own conscience. Just follow your own conscience and let your conscience be your guide. I don't know how many thousand times I've heard that. And you will burn in hell. They're saying you're going to go to heaven. The scripture says, the prophets of Yahweh says, you're going to burn in hell if you follow your own conscience. There used to be an old saying on the police department that they called it, I better say lust, that lust has no conscience. They put it a different way, more vulgar, but lust has no conscience. Like the 2-year-old with gonorrhea, 2 years old. 2 years old. You got that on the news, right? Sick. It's a sick, sick world. Well, they got 2 cardinals here that look like something or another. They don't let me be found in their council, but they're holding up their latest book on homosexuals. The joy of love, they call it, meaning the perverted lust of sodomy. It has nothing to do with love. If you would turn over to 2nd Yochanan quickly. 2nd Yochanan, and let's look at that scripture right there. They forget the scriptures, you know. They first say, well, we got a New Testament, a new covenant. You know, then they start rejecting the new covenant too, as they call it. No such thing as a new covenant. This covenant was made. It was written about in Genesis. This book too, it was written about in Genesis, the work there. How could it be new? It was broadcast clear through by all the prophets. And when it was fulfilled, it became part of Book 1 of the Book of Yahweh. But they're too ignorant to know that too. Well, what can you expect if they can't count to 3? And they celebrate Easter and they're out there thinking, holding up the rabbits and saying, "Where are the eggs?" Well, that's how stupid the religions are, and that's what they're holding up here to the people. And there's a lot of people falling for it, but there's a lot of people coming out of it too. The greatest gathering of all is taking place right now. Yes, like a big oak tree, but when they come here, they're not going to leave. They're going to stay this time. Yeah, Second Yochanan now. Second Yochanan, look at verse 4. It says, "I greatly rejoice that I found," mark out the added word, some of, "I greatly rejoice that I found your children walking in truth according to the laws we have received from the Father Yahweh." Not the gods now, not the lords, but the Father. "But now I plead with you," lady, look back to first, this is the elect lady, the house of Yahweh, of course. "But now I plead with you, members of the house of Yahweh, not as though I wrote any new laws to you. I did not write new laws to you, but that which we had from the beginning, that we love one another." Where did you find that? Where did they find that? That love one another, love Yahweh with all your heart. That's the first and greatest commandment, Yeshua said. And the second one is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. In verse 6, and this is love. What is love? You see that? 2 Yochanan 1, verse 6. This is love. Pope Francis, you two cardinals that's holding up your sodomy book, what true love is keeping the laws of Yahweh. That should be easy enough for anyone to understand. And this is love, that we walk after His laws. Those are the laws that you were given by the Pope yesterday. Maybe that's between the lines somewhere. I just missed it. Those are the laws that you have heard from the beginning. You should walk in them. You should walk in them. If you want eternal life, you should walk in them. Well, of course, they say in a sweeping document on family life that consists of sodomites and all who will break the law. They want to break every law. I think this. I was telling the elders this morning that these temples that are going up, one in Times Square to Baal Lord, and they're going up throughout the world now. But I think this is the last straw, and it's pushing. It's actually pushing relations between a mother and son, father and daughter. These are the last laws that they're trying to break down, and with that it brings sin to the peak. You notice they've hesitated till now, but now they're brave enough to think that they can get anything through. There's 11 states I just read, 11 states that are against. They're passing laws, their judge is passing laws that offsets the Supreme Court, the Coptic Catholic Roman Catholic Supreme Court of America that offsets their laws on sodomy. And they're saying, no, we don't want that in these states, 17 states, I'm sorry. There was 11, and then the very next day it went up to 17. In a sweeping document, so the United States, united, it's not really united, right? No, it's not united, and it's because of these unjust laws. As Isaiah said, it's because of the unjust laws that it's not united. Yahweh is the only one that's got a set of laws that is and will bring unity, complete unity. In a sweeping document on family life that opened a door to divorced and civilized married Catholics, civilly married Catholics, Pope Francis insisted Friday that church doctrine cannot be the final word in answering tricky moral questions. And they tricky. What's tricky about sodomy? The only thing that's tricky about it is the lies they've told about it and making out like that it's righteous, and you can still enter Yahweh's kingdom. Yahweh says you can't, but they're making out like you can. But they don't call it Yahweh's kingdom. They're making out like the gods have a kingdom, which Yahweh has allowed at this time. Satan and her demons have a kingdom. Satan's already kicked out. Her demons are about to follow her, and they've been rejected too, and they're following her. And they will set up a kingdom here on earth, and they will make war against Joshua. It won't last long. It's they have no power, and Yahweh shows they have no power. In Isaiah, he shows this. Isaiah 45. They have no power. The gods are dead. They're the rabbis, the pharaohs, the Coptic Catholic popes, the Roman Catholic popes, all the priests that they decided to make gods out of and pray to, and remember the keeping memorials to the dead. They're dead. They're not alive. The dead know nothing. How could they answer prayer? How could they have any power? The dead know nothing. The living know that they're going to die. They know more than the dead. The dead know nothing. The living, that's all they know. That's all they know until they come to the house of Yahweh, where they begin to learn. They can't even count to 3 till they get to the house of Yahweh, where you are right now. How blessed you are that you know how to count to 3. Church doctrine cannot be the final word in answering tricky moral questions, and that Catholics must be guided by their own informed conscience. I'll show you what the Scripture says about that. And of course, that's what's wrong with the world today. Now, what they're talking about here is what they call gays. The Scripture calls sodomites, are not to be discriminated against, and are to be welcomed into the church with respect and dignity. Well, that's what this is all about. This the two I was going to say distinguished, I guess, separated from salvation. Anyway, Pope calls for compassionate church. Well, this sounds great to the public, especially the public that wants to let their conscience be their guide. And people have told the priest, Yahweh says, go to the priest, and they will teach you. He says, don't assume you can go to the right or the left of what they teach you. Well, I'm 21 years old or more, and I think I know what's right and what's wrong for me. This is a joke, of course. I think they've just learned to count backwards instead of forwards. And of course, this takes them to hell, not to Yahweh's kingdom. But the Pope is, this great sounding words here is to fool the majority, except for those who hear the voice of Yahweh from the house of Yahweh. Here is where the secrets are revealed. The reason they hated Yeshua Messiah, if you'll turn over to Luke 24, we're going to cover just a few scriptures here. Remember, all of this is getting you ready, and of course the large group of people out there that's hearing our voice right now from the house of Yahweh, hearing the laws. This is the only place on earth that is hearing Yahweh's laws and guidance from Yahweh himself. You know, last month when you couldn't see the moon, there's people out there saying they were keeping Passover. They said it the date they had Easter. The Pope had Easter. So you know, if they were just to tap themselves on the skull, you know, and it got their brain to working just a little bit, and maybe call the house of Yahweh. I understand they have house of Yahweh literature, but they use what they want of it, and they discard the rest. But anyway, boys, you picked the wrong time. you know, Yahweh wasn't with you, won't be. The only way you can ever be part of Yahweh's kingdom is to darken the doors of the house of Yahweh. Where He chooses, not you. Well, here in Luke 24 and verse 25, Yeshua said to these cardinals here that's holding up their pretty little booklet of sodomy, Yeshua said, chapter 24, verse 25, O fools, fools and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. O you fools, you fools, why don't you believe what the prophets have spoken, the written word of Yahweh? Well, they won't. And of course, the Pope comes out with flowery words. Now look over to Yochanan. He goes further than this, and he shows in Yochanan 15 why these people hate him. You know, these people took his name out of the Holy Scriptures. We have proof for that. That's not just a wild saying. We have proof for that, and we'll give it to anyone who will write down the phone number on the screen and give us a call. It's an 800 number, unless you're overseas. It's an 800 number. We have an email on the screen also. That's free. It doesn't cost you anything to put in a request by email. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on, I don't know all them big words, but you can find us online at all them places. You can even find us in the newspapers now, big time. But chapter 15 now of Yochanan, the reason that the Coptic Catholics hated Yeshua, the reason that the elders of Israel that was brought out of the land of Egypt, and Yahweh said to Moshe, they're not rejecting you. I mean, yes, they rejected Moshe also, as Acts 7 shows. But he said to Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me, because they want to continue their God worship that they brought out of Egypt with them. That was Catholics. The name was Catholics, meaning universal, meaning they worship all gods. That's what Catholic means. Well, what does the Vatican mean? The word Vatican, in which the Roman Catholic Church said. It means the divining serpent. Google it, you'll find out. Just Google it. If you got to know how to work a computer, you'll find out it means the divining serpent. The deceiving serpent also. That deceiving serpent. Well, Yeshua They rejected Yeshua. They didn't accept Yeshua. No. They killed him. They took his name out of the scriptures. They brought some gods out of Egypt with them, called Krishna and Jesus, and they took the name Yeshua out, and Constantine, he couldn't count either. He said, you're going to worship this one God. And he gave them two. And they've followed it ever since. And now the Pope is going to reveal who is the anti-what? Not anti-Yeshua, but the anti-God Christ. Antichrist. See the deception in this, the great deception? The Pope now is going to reveal who the Antichrist is. And the people have it readily sunk in their brain already, the deception, that this means the Savior. It doesn't mean the Savior at all. The Savior's name was Yeshua. They rejected Yeshua, and they put their God Christ in his place. And everybody who doesn't accept this God called Christ, that came from the Catholic religion, along with his twin brother, and Isis, yes, she was also both ways, homosexual and other. Oh, it's amazing what they're bringing forth here in this Isis woman that's also a man. And says, now here is the Antichrist over here. If the people knew that the name was Yeshua instead of Christ, they'd readily say, well, they're just talking about people who are against their God worship. The God worship they brought out of Egypt with them and have never changed. They kept it all that time. They said, Yahweh said to Moshe, they did this so they could worship these gods. And Samuel had just got them out of a bit of trouble in the chapter before that, 1 Samuel 7, where there's worshiping this goddess, Easter goddess. And it's plain to see that it's there and that they were worshiping this Christ, this goddess, this Isis, half man, half woman. That's the God they're worshiping. And that's a temple that they're building now to this woman right now in Times Square to try to compete with the house of Yahweh. Well, your religion is going downhill from now on. I know you're going to get desperate and you're going to try using nuclear bombs. You're going to fight against Yeshua. That's what Revelation shows. You'll fight against Yeshua, but he's going to win this time. You're not ever going to win a battle from now on. We won't lift a hand to you. We'll lift our hands to Yahweh. Yahweh is telling you where you're going to go. He warns you ahead of time. He warns you ahead of time. You're going to be burned. Nothing but ashes left. It won't even leave you a root or a branch. When you get through, when trying to attack him. In case you don't believe me, there's 72 new weapons out there that they just discovered, NASA just discovered, just a little ways from Earth. No, you can't destroy them. There's plenty more behind them. There's no way you can beat Yahweh. No way. He has all power. And when he gets through, in this seventh work that's planned, where it comes to an end, where sin comes to an end and sinners come to an end, this seventh work then will start resurrecting the dead and teaching them no war, no pain. Well, here Yeshua in chapter 15 of Yochanan, verse 21, he says, but all these things they will do to you because of my name, for they do not know him who sent me. These people who are fighting against the house of Yahweh today, it's the same. They don't know Yeshua. Yeshua was teaching righteousness. Yeshua lived righteousness. Yeshua even died for their sins. and they could be forgiven if they would repent and be converted. These same ones that are fighting against him today. Look at verse 22. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have had their sins revealed. He revealed their sins. That's what he's saying. He revealed their sins. He showed they have no love. The apostles did the same thing. You have no love. All you have is lust. And that for man and man, for each other. Your whole attitude is perverted, as Yahweh shows. You won't be in his kingdom. The gods have no kingdom. The gods are dead. The demons have kingdoms, but the demons are going to come to an end too. The demons, along with Satan, those people that you're worshiping, you call gods, there's a demon behind each one of them. and the demons are going to be working miracles for you. That's what the scripture says. But they won't bring you salvation. They're only going to bring you death. The demons that you're worshiping, Yahweh's house will be protected this time. And it's going to carry this work clear through. After you bring yourselves to an end, then we're going to start resurrecting the dead. Resurrecting the dead in Yeshua first. And then after that, those who qualified like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeshua said, you're going to weep and moan when you see Abraham, who kept the laws, Isaac, who kept Yahweh's laws, and Jacob, who kept Yahweh's laws, all in the kingdom, and you yourselves cast out because you would not keep the laws of righteousness. The laws of righteousness. Well, all we wanted to do was commit sodomy. Well, that's not what you are doing. Yes, you're committing an act to fulfill your lust. And from that lust, you're taking viruses and you're actually mixing those viruses with microorganisms which rape and even harmonize with them, with the microorganisms, and this is growing. Now, science is just now finding this out. We brought it out years ago, what was taking place, and found, because it's in the scriptures, and it shows. It shows all of this in the scriptures, and I went to extremes when I was bringing sermons about microorganisms to show this, and show how Yahweh actually created the earth and the environment by microorganisms. When you create by sodomy, the use of sodomy, the use of fornication or adultery or bestiality, when you create these viruses, you're creating a science. I just read the article this morning. I won't bring it out till the feast. But you are creating an army here of viruses that actually intermingle with microorganisms, other microorganisms. These microorganisms cause what is called STDs. So when you commit this perverted act, you're actually deforming babies. You're fixing babies to where they have no life of their own. They got so many in Germany one time that Hitler said, let's kill them. They have no life. Let's just start putting them in the furnace with the rest of these people that try to keep Yahweh's laws. Let's put them in the same gas chambers with them. And they did. Not only are you doing that, you're creating sicknesses that actually stop the heart from beating, stop the lungs from working, stop your kidneys from operating. Even your intestines start shutting down. Now, you can't tell me that you could believe in any way that is true love. Even the Pope should have better sense than that. A child could see what you're doing is causing all of this evil that we're seeing in the world today. You know what else you're doing? You're confusing the brain to where the only thing that brain knows is what you're trying to promote. Depopulate the earth. If you depopulated the earth from everything but Catholics, and you kept up sodomy and the sins you're doing now, all Catholics would be wiped out in a little while with diseases. You see how stupid you Catholics are for believing this? The house of Yahweh is here to tell you the truth and show you where salvation is. It's not in following your own conscience. Yahweh gives you specific instructions. Yeshua gave it. Look at Matithia. Well, let me read the rest of this first. He who hates me hates also my Father. They hate, and they do today. They hate Yeshua and they hate Yahweh. If you turn over to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians. This is your new covenant, as you call it. The New Testament. In case you don't know it, you're calling that a new covenant. No, it's not a new covenant. It doesn't even say that in the original. As the great Kohan David Yehuda Hawkins brought out. In 1 Corinthians 6, you're named here. And your vice that you follow here is named. Verse 9, 6 and verse 9. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom? Well, I think we should be merciful. You know, let me see that again. How did he say it? I think we should be merciful. Oh, don't that sound great? Pope calls for compassionate church. For compassionate church. Boy, don't that sound righteous to some people. Compassionate. Be compassionate to these people that are murdering people all over the world, and we're supposed to be compassionate to this kind of sin. Repent. That's what Yeshua said. And that's the reason you hated him. Repent is what the disciples, all 12 of the disciples came preaching. At least 11 of them. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? You won't inherit the house of Yahweh. I know you destroyed the house of Yahweh. You destroyed the kingdom of Yahweh that Yahweh gave you here on earth. In 70 CE, you moved to Rome. You sent your General Titus. He destroyed the temple. He destroyed millions of people in Jerusalem. And destroyed the house of Yahweh. I'm not sure, but I think you moved all the stones to Rome. We do know that you moved much of it. You were offering columns, a column. We have record of that so far. A column of that temple to someone. So you must have all the columns there too. I'm talking to the Catholics and how evil you are. There's nothing righteous about your religion. Never has been. And this is what the apostles brought out. This is what the prophets brought out. Yahweh's prophets brought out. And that's the reason you murdered and persecuted the prophets. That's the reason you murdered and persecuted Stephen, who told you about this. Well, we're telling you this today. Yeshua is our high priest. Yeshua, whom you killed, now sits in heaven at the right hand of Yahweh as high priest over the kingdom of Yahweh, which is the house of Yahweh right here on earth. Do you not know this apostle Shaul that you call Paul? And his letters are not Pauline at all. No, he was very much a man. He led about sisters to help him in the work, until you arrested him, put him in prison, and murdered him in Rome. You did that in Rome. Surely you, Francis, could look this record up. You're there with it. Surely you could look it up and see what you did to the apostles. Read Fox's Book of Martyrs. It will tell you. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Do not be deceived. Do not deceive yourselves. Neither fornicators. Fornicators. How many ways can you commit fornication? You know, if you don't know the 12 steps to fornication, you need to look it up. By eye contact, by what goes on in your brain and your ears and so forth, you can commit fornication. The thoughts come when you start visiting and talking to men, unauthorized, or women, unauthorized. Adultery comes from the same thing. Eye contact, hearing, thoughts. And Yeshua said, by these thoughts, you've committed fornication already. In your heart, you've committed it. Stir yourself away from these things. They're unholy and will keep you out of the kingdom of Yahweh. Read it again for yourself. It's easy even for a Christian to find 1 Corinthians in his Bible. It's better to read it out of the Book of Yahweh, but you can find it in your Bible too. The Bible is a rendition of the Book of Yahweh. Isaiah 34:16 says, seek out the Book of Yahweh and read. It was always kept in Yahweh's house until it was stolen by another party and taken someplace else. They thought they could just steal the stuff out of the house of Yahweh and take it where they wanted to. Well, they could. It's cut off from Yahweh, so Yahweh said, I'm not going to restrain them. I'm going to let you guys go your own way, and here is how that own way is going to end up. I'm saying to anyone here who wants salvation, you better come out of this world. You better not be committing fornication and adultery. You better step out of it and don't let anything turn your head, your eyes, your heart, your mind. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom? What will you inherit? You'll have your part with the unbelievers. You'll be given your part. If you take a part of this world or become a part of this world and you practice that, you're going to be given your part in the lake of fire. It will leave you neither root nor branch. You will never be able to ever deceive again. Yes, you deceive people when you do that. You're supposed to be righteous. Yahweh's people, the foundation of Yahweh is sure. Let everyone who names the name of Yahweh depart from evil. Evil is the God that says, let's get some attention here. Let's get some attention. Here's a guitar. Let's start picking it and get the girls over here to dancing for it. Well, the mind starts wandering. It goes into confusion, and it starts going downhill. And if you'll listen real closely, you could even start hearing your IQ drop. Yes. Neither fornicators nor God worshippers, any kind of God worshippers, or Elohim worshippers, nor adulterers, nor men who commit sexual perversion with boys. It seemed like I heard of something like that coming from the divining serpent. Oh, brethren, children, don't ever let this take care in your mind. Don't let it, even the thought. If someone approaches you, fight and get away and go tell an elder, go tell a teacher. Scream. If they chase you, scream, but keep going. Don't go back. Don't look back. Come and tell me, call me, anything. Don't let that occur to you. This is what these two people are pushing. Yes, that's what they're pushing. Got their mouths wide open and waiting to teach you. Boys, No, those who commit sexual perversion with boys will have their part in the lake of fire. Their gods can't save them. They will look up to their gods. They will look down to the devil, down to the destruction of the earth that they have caused. They will weep and mourn and great gnashing of teeth, but it'll be too late for me to help you then. Nor men who commit sexual perversion with other men, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, extortioners will inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. Such were some of you, but you've repented. You're converted. You're practicing Yahweh's righteousness now. Keep it up. Keep it up, and Yahweh bless your every effort in keeping it up. This right here is our work, brethren, and we're doing it. And they know it. They'd like nothing better than to destroy you, but Yahweh has got everything under control. Remember that. He's got everything under control. The gates of hell will not prevail against the house of Yahweh this time. Yahweh allowed the house of Yahweh to be wiped out. He allowed the names to be taken out. He allowed the righteousness to be totally removed from the earth. And then after the earth was totally deceived, sin almost at its peak, he creates his house in the last days. From the ends of the earth, he calls out the name of a person, Anoki, born Anoki, and kept and nourished by his mother, whose daily habits was reading the Bible. The Bible had just come into existence in Oklahoma when this took place, but it had to be. It had to be brought in for all this other work to follow the Bible. It was hidden, sealed behind locks with a death penalty to anyone who tried to get it to the public. Isn't that something? Just like Yahweh said it would be. Isn't that something? Could you predict what's going to take place in your life next week or maybe 30 minutes from now? I had a brother-in-law, 34 years old. He was wanting me to put him in business. He had big hopes, and I was going to put him in business. And he was a football coach, and 34 years old, prime of life. He was so joyous, and he got out and was jogging down the sidewalk about 2 weeks after I had told him what to do to make arrangements so I could put him in business, and he fell dead. Heart attack, they said. His heart gave way. That heart attack, if you could trace it back to the microorganisms to which his heart was made, to the viruses that actually joined in and habitated with them, with the microorganisms, and started building in his heart or throughout his body, back to the sodomite, the two sodomites, or the baby that got raped. Even the baby that got raped by a sodomite could later bring this same virus on down to this person. Maybe his third or fourth generation back could have brought this down to that man's heart and killed him. Now this is their righteousness. This is their compassion. Their compassion is not for people. If they had compassion for people, they'd want to make their lives where they were livable, not unbearable. From the money, if you could trace it back, you would see from the time this virus started, which I remember syphilis and fighting it back when I was working in the State Board of Health laboratories. And I remember all the money that the doctors there were talking about that this was bringing in from penicillin, because we thought penicillin was killing syphilis. and gonorrhea. Well, come to find out, neither one of them was being killed. And they're stronger now than ever before. Gonorrhea is now become drug resistant also. But if you could trace it back and see how much money that this heart attack, from the time the man had the heart attack to the time the virus was created, you would see trillions of dollars flowing through the pharmacy. Yahweh has record of all of that. The Catholic Church, as I brought out in, I think it was Book 1 of the Mark of the Beast, back in the 70s, they had one of the world's great computers. They had the best news agency on the face of the earth. They knew everything that was going on in the earth. It reported right to the Vatican all the time. Now, this was back in the 70s. They're the ones behind all of this. The counterpart was in New York City to their computer in Rome. Brussels, Belgium, in fact. And that from those computers, they knew they could stack knowledge. They could gather knowledge, then they had it to use. It's like having your subconscious mind almost. Nothing as great as a subconscious mind. That's what I brought out too in that book. Of all their greatest computers, they're not but about 1/10,000th as strong of knowledge receiver and user as your subconscious mind. And that's what Yahweh is going to give you if you'll get your mind away from sin, your eyes and heart away from sin, and start practicing this daily, practicing being an example for Yahweh. Not for Satan, but for Yahweh. Don't even have an inkling of what the world wants you to do. And don't fall for this compassion crapola. It's a bunch of bull loney that the Catholic Church is putting out. That's deception. You're going to see stronger deception than this because the demons are fixing to join them. Yes, and their temples of Isis, the temples of Baal, which is Lord, the Lord. They're fixing to join them, and they're going to inspire them big time. They've had thousands of years of practice to bring this about. You just can't realize the wars and fighting and hurt and deaths that they're causing throughout the universe at this time that Yahweh is wanting to stop. You got an inkling of it told to you when the earth was begun. Remember, He made the earth, and it was perfect when He made it. He allowed the demons to inhabit it. They trespassed on it, but they inhabited. Look what their minds were on. And it might have been that these dinosaurs that they created might have actually came from their own group. And the breeding and the diseases and the viruses that they were creating on planet Earth at that time, that they knew more than man. Man is beginning to learn this, and they're already projecting their thoughts of how they could create a fighting machine of flesh, like the dinosaurs. Something that a bullet couldn't penetrate, but yet they could control in some way to go out and do their fighting for them. Oh, this is in dream world. You think, well, this is it can't be done. Remember Dick Tracy? Anyone remember Dick Tracy? The articles, he had a watch that he could talk into, and they could hear it from somewhere else. That was many years before the telephone. He could even see a picture on it and tell what was taking place in a certain place in the city. Oh, that Dick Tracy, he was fantastic. He was the Superman, super detective at that time. Well, it came to pass, didn't it? The things that they're doing right now and in the laboratories and the things that you see, I doubt if you'll see it for a long, long time, but it's being done undercover and, of course, in barns and shield places, but it is being done. And they have dreams of breeding up from mankind and these diseases that they've got all ready to work with, the viruses and the microorganisms, and they're learning to do it. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they haven't got some done already, and they're just figuring out a way to produce them and control them. That's the thing. Well, of course, they got out of hand at the beginning of the world, but the same thing that went on here on earth, brethren, was going on in the planets of heaven, all throughout the universe. And Yahweh says, I'm going to make man in my image, and I'm going to give him authority to stop this, to stop all sin. Which means he had his laws, Yahweh had his laws that he's going to teach to the universe in order to bring the universe under control. You, every one of you, have the opportunity right now. You have your subconscious mind. You can't use it yet, but you will be able to, and you'll be much smarter than these demons in all their years of training, but you'll be so wise and understanding that you will gear everything to peace, joy, and love, true love. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.